fatality rate of comparable units. So if you had heart problems, that's not the unit you want to be taken to. Let's have a look now at how you can influence the emotional climate of your team for the better. Emotions are contagious. We influence the emotions of people around us, and we are influenced by their emotions in turn. It's been discovered fairly recently that we use the same regions of the brain for expressing emotion, through facial expression for example, and for detecting emotions in others. So these two abilities are closely linked. For example, when somebody smiles at you, the part of your brain that's responsible for controlling the facial muscles involved in smiling, the premotor cortex, lights up. So smiles are contagious. Fortunately, laughter and smiling are the most contagious emotion, and they're more likely to spread further between people than, for example, irritation. And very fortunately, depression is about the least contagious emotion. So, if emotions within the team are contagious, how can you make sure that the emotional climate of your team remains positive? Oops. If you're leading a team, the person in that team with the most influence over the emotions of that team is you. You have more influence over how your team feels than you realize. Leaders consistently underestimate the influence that they have on the emotions of their team. When things are going along as normal, team members know what the range of expected emotional responses are. In times of crisis or uncertainty, in situations they've never faced before, they're not so sure how they should be behaving and how they should be responding. So they're going to look to their leader, you, for cues as to how to behave in that unfamiliar situation. You, more than any other team member, set the emotional tone for your team if you're leading that team. So if you remain strong and positive in a crisis or in an uncertain situation, that will have a positive effect on your team. Generally, up to a certain limit, which will partly be culturally determined, the more emotionally expressive you are, the more influence you have on the emotions of people around you. So in teams where the nominal leader is not very emotionally expressive, a kind of emotional power vacuum can develop. In that situation, another team member who is more emotionally expressive can become the, as it were, emotional leader of the team, the one who has the most influence on the team's emotional climate, even if they don't have high status on paper. The good news from this is that you can still have a strong positive effect on your team's emotional climate, even if you're not the nominal leader of your team. Now let's have a look at 4 ways in which you can become a more emotionally intelligent leader. So here's our 4-quadrant model of emotional intelligence again. There are things that you can do to develop your strengths in each of these 4 competency areas: self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and relationship management. Let's start with self-awareness, since this is the foundation of the other competencies. One thing you can do is keep a journal of how you're feeling each day. I suggest that you take maybe just a few minutes, probably ideally first thing in the morning before the day has had a chance to hit you with any kind of crises or challenges, and just write down how you're feeling. There are a few benefits to this. One is that writing your emotions down helps to get them into perspective, so you have some distance from them and hence some awareness and some control. Secondly, over a period of months, if you look back over the journal from a few months ago and you can relate it to what was going on in your life at that time, you can see how what you feel, how you respond is related to particular events in your life. So you gain a greater self-awareness about how you respond to particular situations and what you've learned from them as well. Another way in which you can increase your self-awareness is to have some coaching, receive some coaching, either from an external executive coach, or if you have a coaching culture within your organization, maybe from a colleague, maybe from your manager. That can be very valuable in having somebody to act as a sounding board, in gaining more idea about how you feel about particular issues, and also, of course, the other benefits of coaching in terms of coming up with new ideas for problem solving and so on. One further way you can increase your emotional self-awareness is to ask for feedback, ideally from people that you trust, so that you know it's honest feedback. And bear in mind, of course, the more respect they hold you in, possibly they may even hold you in a certain amount of awe. So there may be an element initially of them telling you what they think you want to hear. So emphasize that you want honest feedback. Giving some attention to your emotional self-awareness will also enable you to notice the signs of if you're getting into a negative or unproductive emotional state. If you notice those signs, you can head it off before it gets too strong and hijacks your thinking capacities. Let's have a look now at some ways of managing your emotions and making sure that they don't get so strong that they hijack you. First item on the list there, the pause is a very useful tool in emotional self-management. If you notice the signs within yourself that you're getting angry or irritated, you can stop what you're doing, take some calm breaths, and change your posture. This will interrupt the pattern of emotional escalation and give your body and your thoughts a chance to calm down. Similarly, it's worth pausing for a moment at the end of one task before you start in on the next task, so that you're not carrying stresses over from one task to another. Following on from that, it's a good idea at work to take a break every 90 minutes or so. The reason being that we have a natural cycle of activity and rest. In the wild, in nature as it were, we would be active for about 90 minutes and then we'd have a little rest for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'd be active again. And that cycle goes on through the waking part of the day. It tends to shorten a little bit towards the end of the evening or the afternoon, so we might be active for about 60 minutes before we feel like we need a break. Of course, we're not robots. We don't automatically shut down at the end of every 90 minutes. It's perfectly possible, and I've observed this time and time again in the UK with clients that I've worked with. It's perfectly possible to work all the way through the morning without taking a break. It's perfectly possible to grab some lunch at your desk and work through lunch, work all the way through the afternoon, take work home, work at weekends, and so on. People do that because they think they're getting more done, or they feel guilty if they take a break. Actually, because they're working in a way that is not friendly to their brain, to the way they're made, they're actually being less productive. What happens in the rest activity cycle is this. At any given time, our brain has two hemispheres, of course, left and right hemisphere. At any given time, there's more activity going on in one hemisphere or the other. So one hemisphere or the other is dominant. Most of the time, for most of us in work mode, it's the left side of the brain, the left hemisphere, that's dominant. When we take a break, when we have a rest, activity moves over to the right side of the brain, so that becomes dominant for a short while until it's time to go back to work again, and the left side is dominant. The left side is responsible for things like thinking, analysis, words, maths, reason, logic, calculation, analysis, those kind of functions, which for most of us is work mode most of the time, unless we're some kind of maybe creative artist or something like that. The left side of the brain is more creative, more dreamy. It tends not to think in words. It's not very good with maths. It tends to think in feelings and symbols and images. And it works by association rather than logic. If we work solidly for several hours and we don't take a break, eventually the left side of the brain gets very tired. I don't know if you've found yourself in the situation at the end of a day where you maybe read a page of a report, executive summary of a report, and you read it 3 or 4 times and you've still got no idea what it's saying. Or you add up a column of figures and a long column of figures and you get a different answer every time. That's a sign that the side of your brain that you've been using for work mode has got tired. And in that situation, eventually it will hand over the work to the other side of the brain, which is really not equipped to process words, certainly not equipped to process mathematical calculations, which is why eventually you end up just wanting to stare out of the window. So, when you take a break, the left side of your brain can relax. It can have a rest. And when you come back to work, it doesn't have to be 15 minutes, could be 10, could be 5. It's refreshed. So again, you get more done in less time, you make fewer mistakes. I used at one time to do a lot of stress management advice for individuals. Often they were referred to me by their doctor, and a lot of these were very high-achieving, hard-working individuals, and they used to say things like, well, this is great in theory, Andy, but I would have to take all of those 15-minute breaks and add them on to the end of my working day in order to get the work finished. So I'd end up spending even longer at work than previously. Well, actually, no. We're not machines. We don't work at a constant rate. Sometimes you accomplish a huge amount in a short time. Other times it can feel really hard work to get anything done. When you take breaks, you can get more done in less time. You're working more effectively. And of course you give permission, by doing it yourself, you give permission for your team to take breaks and work more effectively as well. So don't take my word for it, try it out in your own work and see what happens. Finally, as we've mentioned, if you ensure that your overall mood is positive, and to do this it helps to focus on what's working in your life and in your work, what's been achieved and what you appreciate in your situation, you'll be more resilient in the face of setbacks. I should mention that in the face-to-face workshop that I'm going to conduct at the Palm 5 event in May, we'll learn some more practical ways of being centered and in control of your emotions, which aren't really possible to do via webinar. You need to actually be there in the room, so that you can stay calm and resourceful in any situation. Now, let's look at some ways of enhancing your awareness and understanding of emotions in others. Pay attention to the body language and voice tone of the other person when you're in a meeting with them, when you're speaking with them, when you're in conversation. Body language and voice tone are the markers which give you clues as to how other people are feeling. The next point is really important. Be fully present. Be 100% there and give the other person, or if you're speaking to a group, your audience, 100% of your attention. Have you ever had a meeting with a superior whose attention is obviously elsewhere? Maybe they're looking at their emails while you're talking. Maybe they're taking phone calls during the meeting. How do you feel in those situations? Rest assured, if you're not giving 100% of your attention to the person you're with,